Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Booze Brothers. This is a podcast where we try to have honest, no fluff conversations about our various experiences of quitting alcohol. With me today, as always, is my brother Matt. Hello, Matt.
Good morning, Mark. Yep, we are back again, as always, getting into a nice run of weekly podcast, YouTube videos, however you watch us. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, I suppose just very quickly, we should mention as well that we're now on Spotify. Get us. We are blazing a trail
Oh,
here.
wow.
Stand aside other very popular podcasts who are names of
Yeah,
at the moment.
exactly.
But so
Yeah.
you can now listen to us on Spotify. And it's just under the Booze Brothers. If you want to plug us into your ears while you're down the gym or driving in your car, sometimes that can be an easier way to listen to these things. Then fill your boots. We're on there. So the conversation that we wanted to have today, we sort of felt the conversation we had last week, which was largely around is if you've got a bit of an issue, a challenge with alcohol, is it really your fault? Are you really to blame? Is it really your fault if you've got any challenges? And I sort of tried to skirt around the issue. I'm trying to avoid saying things like if you've got an alcohol problem or if you think you're an alcoholic, because I just think that it's so layered, and I think that there are so many levels of how alcohol can impact and affect people, from just the periodic, I drank too much, I've got a terrible hangover, and it's impacting me and getting in the way, intermittently, to something which is maybe a more regular thing. So anyway, so this is an interesting conversation, because I think at what point where do you draw the line between accountability for your actions and, where does the accountability to your actions start or stop? And where does just the inevitability of succumbing to what is a psychoactive, highly addictive, very, very unpredictable substance when exposed to human beings? Where do you draw that line? I think I've said it before. The fact of the matter is we pretty much encourage everybody to society, certainly if you're in, Western culture, or if you live in a country where alcohol is widely consumed, it's difficult to avoid it. Yeah. And so we kind of get everybody to do it. And then we kind of wince when it turns out that they have what is an inevitable, set of challenges, because it's addictive. It's a drug. We talked about this before. Ethanol is a drug. If you drink, you're a recreational user of drugs, and that's just a fact. The fact that society has decided to present it in a way which is acceptable. It's a bit like the whole marijuana debate. The fact that there are, over the last 40 or 50 years, there have been lives ruined because people have gone to jail and spent years and years in jail for something that society has all of a sudden decided is, so actually it's probably okay. So now we'll legalize that. This debate is, obviously it's broad reaching, but we're talking about alcohol. So really it's kind of, to what extent are we to blame? How should we regard a drink problem? Should you treat it differently to somebody that's got just a regular illness? I think off air we just mentioned, if somebody said my daughter's suffering from anorexia, that there would be a lot of compassionate reaction to that. You'd be immediately sensitive. You'd be immediately sort of invested in trying to help and sympathize. But I think conversely, if you said my wife is an alcoholic, there's a bit of a recoil. Well, my husband is an alcoholic. There's a bit of a recoil. And as a follow-on to that, is it a disease? And I know you talked about that in your book. People talk about alcoholism as a disease. Is it a disease, or is it actually just a mental? What is the reason why we drink? And just my final point on all of this is twofold, really. One is, for me anyway, I believe that the way that we interact with alcohol is something that exists on a mental plane. I think that alcohol affects brain chemistry differently in different people. It's why we like different types of music. Everybody's different. I could drink a glass of wine. My brain reacts in a certain way, maybe different to how someone else's reacts. And I think that to that end, there is normally a sort of an underlying set of reasons that would explain why somebody drinks. And I sort of extend that further. So, what are the reasons? Is it, what are the sort of, what is it about somebody that, leads them to get into trouble with alcohol? And then finally, why do we treat mental issues? If somebody says, look, I'm struggling, I need help with my sort of mental health, why do we treat that differently to somebody who says, I'm struggling, I need help with my physical health, I'm going to get a personal trainer, or I'm going to go and, so actually that's a lot. I've completely done a whole podcast in one introduction, but there's a lot to talk about. I know you've got some thoughts on it, Matt, and we'll maybe circle back to some of the points that I've raised. But yeah, let me hand over to you, and I'll take a breath and see what
that's do you know what, it's days like today where I sometimes think, have you snuck over to Paris and read my notes? Because you literally, and gone in order as well, which is impressive. So look, yeah, I love this topic. Is fascinating, and it's super important because and I'm almost reading verbatim my notes here, but if you look at alcohol itself, and you look at that question, is how do you regard someone with a drink problem? You need to go back to how do people get there, and I think in many ways, many people would argue that it is that person that has got themselves there in the first place. But I just try to believe that that's not necessarily the whole picture. And I was thinking about it, and actually, do you know what? In some nations, countries, like the country we come from, we are born to drink. It's what we will do, not what we might do. The culture is such that even if you end up being a non-drinker, you probably will at some stage have tried it. So then, that's one thing I just really believe. We are born to drink. We go through our transition in our life where you become an adult, and part of that transition in many places is the introduction of alcohol. So is it a surprise that people end up having problems with it? The answer to that is no. Now, the whole disease illness thing, you can argue it many ways. I look at my case, and I don't believe I had either a disease or an illness. I'm on the fence with that one, really. But what I did have was an overwhelming desire to drink, and that severe want was there. I would get to a certain time of the day, and I'd be looking forward to that. Oh, when can I have a drink? Is it 6 o'clock? And that, maybe that's the disease part. Maybe that is the illness. I certainly believe it is a mental illness as opposed to a disease, but I'm not a doctor, so I can't really confirm that. And I think it's still a really a grey area. And just going back as well to one of the things you said, and it does affect everyone differently. And if you feel that you have the disease of alcoholism, then that is what you have. It has been classified as a disease, and I don't want to take that away from anyone. I'm just talking about my experience. Did I feel I had a disease? Personally, I didn't. But, I did take full responsibility, and I think that is important. I think you have to accept, and I think that's even part of AA, is that, that you have this problem, and that you need to take responsibility. So I did, and then I chose to stop. And, I chose that path because it was the only path that I had left, really, but it still fundamentally remained a choice. And I think I do fundamentally believe it's a mental illness. I do believe that it's in the mind. It's more that for most people, I believe it's more that than a physical disease. I think the physical part of stopping is not the hard part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a mental dynamic. I don't
Yeah,
necessarily think that it's a mental illness. I just think that there are some human, there are some people who are predisposed to alcohol impacting them in a very, very different way to how it will impact others. And I do think that's completely out of your control. I don't know. And I think it's playing Russian roulette with society as a whole when we encourage everybody to drink. And I think you are right. I think, we are both from the UK. You live in Paris now. I lived in the US for a long, long time, similar culture there. You celebrate with a glass of champagne. You commiserate with alcohol. There is a ritualistic, even there's the sort of religious impact, the cultures of Christian society where wine features very highly. So it's very difficult to avoid alcohol, and I think there's a mental dynamic which impacts others, like I say, that makes them more vulnerable to it. And for anybody who doesn't know what it's like to experience alcohol cravings, the best example or the best analogy I can give you would be it's like a sexual crave. It's like if you found somebody, let's say you man or woman, you find somebody incredibly attractive, you both find each other incredibly attractive, and you had to spend time in close proximity to that person. But it's a primal urge, and it is clearly, I'm not a brain scientist, but it's all to do with how the brain seeks out the reward systems, etc., etc. So my view on it is it's not really your fault. First and foremost, it's not your fault. You cannot be blamed for this. If anything, it's the fact that society itself encourages it and then does very, very little to offer true, genuine sympathy and empathy for anybody who ends up struggling. This thing ruins fucking lives. Let's not, let's be honest. It
yeah,
ruins lives.
and
More people
many,
die
many,
on the roads. Sorry, go on.
and many more than we know. I think it's hidden away in lots of families, in lots of situations. It's that dark secret.
Yeah.
It's mustn't tell anyone that Uncle Johnny is an alcoholic or whatever. And that's the criminal part about it, is that why?
Yeah, and so it is I mean, we'll have to get the statistics, but I think it's the worst, most impactful, most harmful drug on the planet, way ahead of anything else, way ahead of heroin, way ahead of cocaine. So if you're somebody who is fortunate enough to be able to drink in moderation, you always use the phrase, if you have to think about moderation, you probably can't moderate it, because people who drink moderately, they don't even think about it. It's just now, if you're one of those lucky people, then great. But if you're somebody who is predisposed to be caught in the trap of alcohol, then it's not your fault. It's not your fault. However, that doesn't mean that you can be absolved of all responsibility. I think that what you have to do is listen to podcasts like this. You have to think very carefully about how you drink. And I think if you are doing that, and I think if you're doing what you can it's a journey, isn't it? Because, if you listen to the way you explained how you stopped, Matt, it started with am I drinking too? You start asking the questions,
Yeah,
am I
yeah,
drinking too much? I feel like nobody else drinks as much as you start typing into Google, how much is too much? Is red wine good for you? All those things you talk about.
yeah.
I think if you're on that journey, then you deserve all the help and support and encouragement that anybody who is suffering almost any other illness should be afforded. It's no different. If
Yeah.
you're ignoring it and you're just ignoring your responsibility, then that's not okay.
No,
That's where I lack. this subject. I don't think anybody's to blame, and I think it's a very personal thing. People stop for different reasons. I don't think it has to necessarily be a really, really problematic thing. It's just something that gets in the way and is stopping you from being the best version of you. Um, but yeah, that's where I land on it. It's again, like all things alcohol, there's so many layers to it. There's an endless conversation to be had. But I think that for this, and for the message that I would like to give to anybody listening to this is, if you're listening to this thinking, oh, do you know what? I think it's getting in the way. We always say, could your life be better if you weren't doing it? If you're starting to have those questions, then the answer is, it is. But it's not your fucking fault. It's not.
Yeah, yeah.
And for anybody who's with someone that's drinking too much, you need to understand that they didn't choose this. They didn't do this on purpose. This is not something they wanted to happen. You can't blame them for it. I think that's where it, and maybe we should do another one on how do
Yeah,
you deal with someone that's got a drink problem. But however, if you are drinking too much and it is starting to creep in, then it is incumbent upon you to try to get on top of this thing.
no, well, nicely put, and I think it's a great way to end. I totally agree. No one on this earth sets out to have a drink problem. No one. It's a slow burner, particularly with alcohol. It catches you out. It catches up with you. It goes from fun, celebratory, to problematic, to regular use, to addiction. And that it doesn't happen overnight. It's 10, 15, 20, 30 years. But you're absolutely right in what you said. There is no stigma. There is honestly, no problem. It's not your fault. But what is your fault is if you choose not to do anything about it, or not to try to do anything about it, because the help is out there. It's what we try and do. And the one thing that's blocking, and maybe we should do, another session on this, is the stigmatism of being a non-drinker, of, what will people think? And I had it last night. I had a friend. I call him a friend. He's a colleague, but he's a friend, who came over for dinner. We don't see him. I don't see him that much outside of work, and he doesn't drink much at all. Like, he had a glass of wine. I had a non-alcoholic beer, actually. And when he left, my wife said, "Oh, does he know?" And I was like, my first thought was, what does it matter? So I said, I don't know, and I don't care, and it doesn't matter. And she only asked just because she was curious, because my story is very much out there, and I have no problem at all with talking about it, because I think if I don't, then how can I help other people? And that's why we do this. So,
and that is a really interesting one, because I think that most people, there are people who judge, and there will always be people that judge, that maybe look down their noses. I think most people are intrigued. Most people I meet, particularly at my age, I mean, I'm 55 now, be 55, 56 in a few weeks' time. How did that happen? Around this age, particularly, I think people are aware of how harmful alcohol is, and I think a good percentage of people would either like to stop completely, or they would like to reduce the amount of alcohol they consume. And I don't think it's as, I think it's ludicrous that we live in a world where something that is as harmful and as damaging as alcohol is, and it really, really is. Don't be under any illusions. It's awful. There's no amount of alcohol that's good for you.
No.
Where we live in a world that's sort of embracing wellness and sort of holistic therapies like meditation and nutritional diets, yet the alcohol still plays a part in that. That's clearly wrong. And I think just on the sort of triggers and the reasons why people do it, the accountability point, I just think as well that the mental health of humans is something which is still a little bit under the carpet. I think, I wish that, in the same way, like I said, someone says, I need to lose some weight, I need to get fit, I'm going to get a personal trainer. You know, that would be the same as saying, yeah, I'm feeling low. I don't feel as confident as I feel like I should do, or I don't feel like I've got issues and problems. I get triggered. We'll go and get that sorted. Get on top of that, and that's a whole other conversation. Maybe we should push that into a different one. But I've actually written quite a lot about things that, you know, trigger you, things that happen in life that might precipitate behavior like drinking, then things you can do to get on top of those things that can actually, you know, so, you know, quitting drinking is not just about not putting the alcohol in your mouth, although that's ultimately what you're doing. You know, to some extent, it's also about getting out in front of some of the things that might trigger you to do the thing you want to stop. So maybe that's a conversation. You know, what can you do to avoid the triggers? That might be quite a good topic, but maybe we'll leave it there because we've been going for quite a while. But yeah, anything else to say on that one, Matt, or is this
just a final thing from my side, just to wrap up, and that's you know, we were just talking about the stigma and you know, what how you should view someone who has had a problem. And I wrote something down this morning, and I'm just going to read it verbatim because I think if it gives anybody hope and belief, because there really is a transition when you do stop drinking. And I put, my view is that you should become very interested in those who have overcome drinking problems, because breaking addiction requires a mental reset, a change in how you live your life. It shows an individual's desire to stop doing something that is mentally and in some cases physically addictive, and that is impressive. So I think you should be proud, and I think this is what this whole thing is about, is you know, bringing some choice words and thoughts around what it means to stop, and how you should regard people who have a drink problem, and those who overcome it, you know, should be praised. And I believe, you know, anybody who is even attempting to do something about it should be praised. So keep it up, keep going, whatever stage you're at. You know, you got this, and we'll always be here to help you. So on
yeah,
that
no,
note,
definitely. I think anybody that has quit who doesn't drink, they've got a if nothing else, they have a unique perspective. I think that the going through that process of quitting does make. I don't know if I wrote down. Funny enough, one of the notes I wrote down was, does this experience give you something back? Do you become a better person because you? And I think again, that's another conversation which we haven't got time for now. But I think actually it does. I think the fact that you've been through that journey, that you've come out the other side, gives you perspective, gives you probably a perspective on life in general, which is pretty valuable and helpful and unique, and something that be shared. But let's leave it there for now, because we're in danger of waffling on, which, you know, we're good at. And we'll call it a day. So thanks for listening. Like I said, we're on Spotify now. If you want to listen to us there, please do like, comment, share, subscribe, do all of the things that will help us to get this. We don't do this for any other reason other than to help. Honestly, this is something that we do to try to give back. So it's something we can do. You know, maybe everybody should find something that you can do, which is just to help others. This is purely for that. We're not making any money out of this. Don't intend to, don't expect to. It's purely to try to get some words into the heads of one or two other people who, you know, may just hear something on this, and it might help them to build a better life for themselves. So with that, thanks for listening. Until the next time, Matt, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone.